Welcome to Bold by Nature. This is the JLG Architects podcast that's exploring the untold stories behind the creation of the Theodore Roosevelt Presidential Library in Medora, North Dakota. Right now, as we're recording this is the big week. This is the grand opening. And just a few days from now, the world will get to see what you all knew about a long time ago, a little bit more personally. So there were hundreds of people that gave their all to make this a reality. And we know that those of you on the call with us today are special guests. You're some of those people. And so we wanted to start, this is the very first episode, we want to start with some of the upfront stories. You know, how this library came to be, what all had to happen to make it work in Medora and in this spot. Today we have Amy McCann with Theodore Roosevelt Presidential Library Foundation, Stacy Swanson with Billings County, and Zach Mathern with JLG Architects. And I'm going to ask each of you to just share a little bit about your life leading up to when you became a part of this project, and also share when you became a part of this project. Some of us was a long time ago. And Amy, let's go ahead and start with you.
Okay. Yeah. So I moved to Medora 13 years ago with my husband and two kids. I became a stay-at-home mom while my husband worked for Theodore Roosevelt National Park. As my kids got a lot older, I started working, and I was actually a park ranger at Theodore Roosevelt National Park for about 5 years. And I remember in 2016, which was the centennial of the National Park Service, when there was a festival about the Theodore Roosevelt Presidential Library. And so I joined that festival, and those conversations were all were happening about this place, this thing that was coming to North Dakota. But for me, it really started in 2020, and I met Ken Veen, who was on the project, and I knew Ken whenever he came onto the project, and I was a park ranger at the time, and he came into the park, and I was so excited to see him because I knew him and I knew about this project. I'm like, wow, this is really going to happen. This is going to happen here. They hired people.
It's real.
And I went up to Ken. And you know what? I started just telling him about all of the challenges he was going to have. I know this community. I know how they're feeling. I know this landscape. I know how remote it is. Challenge. And I was throwing that at him. And I think that he was probably thinking, yeah, this might be the person to ask to join the team. And so when he asked me to join the library, I tell you what, it was really exciting. But man, was I intimidated. I was just like, wow, this is huge. This has never been done before. I'm not sure about this. And he's like, no, Amy, come on up. Check out the design competition. No, you don't have to make a decision today. Just come up and learn more about it. Because being part of the Park Service, we were, kind of protected and as a federal employee, not engaged, in that way. And so whenever he asked me, I'm like, okay, I'll come up. I'll check it out. And yeah, I was just blown away by how much care was being taken. And so whenever I decided, it was hard to decide to make that shift from working for the National Park Service to come over and work for the library. But looking back on it now, where we are in this moment, it's been one of the greatest privileges in my career. So
a decade later.
Yeah.
And Stacy, I'm curious if you attended that same community event with the design architects? Because I remember that moment as well. Were you there?
Yep, I was there too. And actually, I've been the county planning and zoning person for Billings County since 2011. And at that time, like the oil boom was going on, and we had heard about the Theodore Roosevelt Library, but it was always focused in Dickinson. And then when it really hit here was kind of a surprise to everybody, because it was during Governor Burgum's State of the State address in January 2019. And, the first address was just like a normal governor speech talking about, the highs of North Dakota and population trends and the oil and gas development. And then he closed with, to leave our legacy, the Theodore Roosevelt Presidential Library will be at the entrance of Theodore Roosevelt National Park. And I'm like, huh? did anybody know about this? It's like, this is brand new news to me. And so that was really the timeline of like, okay, this is a project, and now I need to get ready for it. And then it was kind of quiet for a while. And then there was a first community meeting like in April of 2019, but Governor Burgum's office wasn't there and the library board wasn't there, but everybody, there was some Park Service people there. And at first it was being planned for the park, and then nobody really knew for sure where it was going to be. And so there was a lot of unknowns, and then the site was selected, and then, the design competition was a fun moment where you got to meet the designers, and it was fun.
And then, Zach, do you mind sharing how your first moments with this project?
Yeah. I originally started working with JLG in Grand Forks, but then I think it was maybe 2015 or some time around there, I moved out to Dickinson, North Dakota. So I was kind of nearby-ish. And of course, originally the library was planned to be in Dickinson. So JLG had a unique kind of opportunity to be involved in some of the really early idea generation about what is a presidential library? What does it even mean for a presidential library to be in North Dakota for Theodore Roosevelt? So my first kind of official experience was an immersion experience where we went out to the Elkhorn Ranch unit of the national park where Theodore Roosevelt had his Elkhorn cabin. And we sat in a circle with folks from the national park, scholars of Theodore Roosevelt, the DSU Roosevelt Center that's been scanning Theodore Roosevelt's papers and documents for over 10 years. We met with that group of people just to kind of talk about what would this maybe be. And we specifically talked about the Elkhorn cabin, and would there maybe be a recreation of this historic kind of structure? So that was part of my work early on, was actually researching and designing a recreation of this cabin that would maybe go at the presidential library. And so that was in May of 2016. And then I started doing a few things personally and with the planning group. I went camping out at the Elkhorn Ranch unit, and I just found out today, it was on July 1st of 2016 that I camped there alone. And so I'll be camping again on July 1st of 2026 nearby the presidential library as well. So that's kind of like a full circle thing I just realized today. So yeah, that was my first kind of involvement in the project very early on, before it truly had a site. And obviously that site changed a few times and eventually made its way to Medora.
Perfect. Well, I know all of us have talked briefly about the journey of where the library will be. And it's been in different spots, I know, throughout North Dakota, maybe beyond. Amy, I'm wondering if you can share a little bit about how it arrived where it is today.
Sure. Well, I can tell you what my perspective, I guess, would be on that. I think about Theodore Roosevelt and a lot of times presidential libraries will end up in the location that someone was born. So it's like, okay, well, TR was born in New York, and he had died there as well, and much of his political career and life unfolded in the East. And so, but whenever you think about some of that history that TR had, and the question of why North Dakota, we know that we all know in North Dakota, at least, that he said, I never would have been president if it hadn't been for my experience in North Dakota. And we think back at that time, being a young man and losing his wife and mother on Valentine's Day on the same day at such a young age. It was so devastating, to him. And so he comes out here to the Badlands and just devastated and almost depressed in a way, not wanting to live anymore. But then he throws himself into that ranching, life, the hunting life. And he even once said, if I lost all of my memories and only had one, which one would it be? And it would be as a rancher in North Dakota. So we know that this place had a lot of spiritual connections with TR, but it was also the place where he was reborn, where he was transformed. And this place, the Badlands, it constantly has that for people. When they come and they visit, they're constantly looking at the Badlands and wondering about them and questioning them because they're so unique and different. And it transforms a lot of our thinking. And this library and what it is today will do that for people. So I think that it's so fitting for it to be here in the Badlands and not, just like on this butte in Medora, but it is in between the Elkhorn Ranch and the Maltese Cross Ranch, TR's two ranches. And it's in the doorstep of Theodore Roosevelt National Park, and it's surrounded by the Little Missouri grasslands. And TR created all of these things. So it's such a fitting place for his library.
And if there's one thing I've learned working with you, Amy, for the past 5 or 6 years, it's that you love the Badlands, and you're a great source of knowledge when it comes to the wildlife, when it comes to the plants. One of my favorite memories of this project was picking out the rammed earth wall colors with you, and just being able to go through and vote and talk about the different colors of the Badlands and the different seasons and the different lights. And you were just always such a positive and energetic voice through this whole process, very pro-Badlands. One of the things I think is most beautiful about this project is that the land transition was an act of Congress that was signed by the President of the United States. But the zoning had to change for it to become a presidential library. And that decision was made by just a handful of local politicians that represented and were leaders in Medora. And you have both ends of the spectrum there. Would you mind just sharing the Billings County processes that we had to go through in order for this to be built, this type of project to be built on this land?
Yeah, there was several zoning meetings. The first one would be the rezoning or the subdivision plat of the 90 acres to ensure that there's access to the site. So there's an easement from, Chateau Road up to the site. And then we did a full rework of our recreational zoning district in preparation of the library. And so we increased or amended regulations so that we have aesthetic guidelines and requirements for using natural materials and being dark sky friendly lighting and native landscaping whenever possible. And so, that's not just for the library, but it's for development surrounding Medora, which is kind of considered our recreational area for zoning that's geared towards the tourism industry. And so I think it's been a good change.
And I know, Zach, as we were moving through the design, there were a lot of agencies in, whether it's city agencies or county agencies, that we had met with and got to know much better through the process, make sure they were comfortable with what was happening. Could you share a little bit about those interactions?
Yeah, early on, I think there was communication between the city of Medora and Billings County about who really has jurisdiction here and how should we handle, requirements about signage and building siting and setbacks and things. While I wasn't involved in those conversations necessarily, it really impacted our work as we were submitting information and keeping all these entities, involved in the process. I think it was really great that the county and the city kind of designated which entity was going to be in charge of which thing, which really helped us streamline which code or ordinance do we need to make sure we're following. And, in a lot of cases, we followed county zoning. And in a few unique situations where the city has a lot of care and interest in preserving kind of a historic feel for Medora, we then kind of went to the city zoning for those types of things. So I think that framework of agreement and working together in Medora amongst all the entities is a really unique thing that I haven't seen on other projects so in depth. But that was helpful for us ultimately in kind of knowing what we're supposed to be following. Of course, the state had some involvement. Some of the systems are really complex. And the water treatment system is beyond anything that's ever been done, even not only locally, but regionally. And so some of the systems for specifically waste and water systems are kind of more regulated on a state level. So it kind of ranges from local city to state kind of level regulations, and we kind of regularly communicated with each of those groups to make sure that everyone was kind of understanding what's happening on the project. And that was a big part of the work, is how do you translate something that is very complex, maybe bigger and grander and more complex than have been done locally? How do you communicate those ideas to these various entities so that they understand what you're trying to do?
Stacy, did you want to comment on that, or did you have?
Yeah, I'd just like to expand. We did have kind of a unique situation that not very many counties and cities have. Medora used to always have a 1/2 mile extraterritorial zoning authority, and then it was in May of 2020 they had their final reading that had first began in March of 2020. To expand their extraterritorial zone from 1/2 mile to 1 mile. And when that happens, the county and the city has joint jurisdiction over the process. So we were still learning who's in charge. And then the city and the county entered a joint powers agreement so that, we both have a say during, in everything that happens in the ETZ, which is kind of unique because it's even the first 1/2 mile of the ETZ plus the second 1/2 mile of the ETZ. And so sometimes with the development projects, the library learned along with us on how we were going to approach this project.
Absolutely. And it wasn't even just the city and the county in Medora. Amy, I know you had great relationships and set up a lot of meetings and interactions. Mm-hmm. I'm thinking of the individuals we met that even were responsible for emergency services, that volunteered for the fire department. Could you share some of the partnerships and people that you engaged with in the community, maybe beyond the city or county?
Yeah. I think that was such an important time to be communicating to not just the immediate community, but the surrounding community as well. So throughout this whole process, the design process, even before we got to, zoning, we met, JLG architects and Snowhetta. We met with emergency services, but not just them. We took the opportunity to make sure that the area, the people in the community knew what was happening and going on. So, yeah, we met with different grazing folks. We met with different community businesses to talk to them about, even to get input on the design. It was like, hey, people that run kitchens, we would go and we would talk to people in Medora. Here's our ideas. What do you think? And so I believe that all of that community input, even with our tribal nations, the constant transparency in what we were doing really led to the success. Once we got to that decision process, it made it easy because you had engaged with all of the zoning people and county commissioners, city zoning, city council, grazing association, forest service, even some of the other economies surrounding Medora, I would go to and give them updates and tell them what's going on. We even had community meetings as well to let people know like what's going on, but then also to give them a chance for their voice to be heard, to express their concerns, and then to have discussions about those concerns as well. So I feel like all of those meetings for maybe 3 years or 2.5 years really paid off whenever it came time for the zoning and the county commissioners to make those decisions. They knew everything. They knew everything about the project. They had a say. They had an input. Even those lights, the night sky, the lights became. That was a fun experiment, to go through that with the county of like, oh, okay, this is what you want. This is what we want. We're on the same page, but now let's learn about it. And so all of that work, I would say, Jen, that you guys did in being there in the community and answering the questions and the transparency made it easy, I feel like, when it came time for the big, scary decisions, that needed to be made.
I was always surprised sometimes by how smart these local community members are and the questions that the commissioners would ask us that were very specific about the photovoltaic system capacity. Yes. and just a group of people that are very thoughtful and intelligent and want to know the details and fully understand the problem. Was there anything that throughout being a part of this community, was there anything that was a hiccup for anyone that was surprising to you about the project, that you were just like, oh, I'm surprised that that's something that they're concerned about or something that they're worried about for the future?
I was surprised that the county even had some of these things in their recreational zoning related to dark sky lighting, related to preserving the ridgeline. Like, there are major cities that don't have any of that. Mm-hmm. And as a design firm, like, we want to do those kind of forward-thinking, good design decisions, but we're not required to in many of the locations we work. And to see that we were required to follow some of those forward-thinking things in somewhere as rural as Medora and Billings County was very refreshing. And it's like, it wasn't like, oh no, I have to meet this zoning requirement. It was like, whoa, there's a requirement that I need to provide this good lighting and not too much. Like, thank you for having that guideline so that we can do good design. So that was really surprising and wonderful for us.
And you know what, Zach, like when I think about where we are now with the building and it's built, and whenever you come up the road, up Chateau Road, and when you look over at the building, all you're seeing is all this vegetative roof, right? And it's rising from the earth. You don't really see how massive it is. You just see this vegetation, this thing over there that looks like it belongs in the land. And I know that we've talked a lot about it and we had that vision of it, but actually seeing it, today is just like, I get to experience that with people now. They're like, oh my gosh, this building, when they get inside, they're like, this building is huge. And I'm like, yeah, it didn't seem huge when you were looking at it on the outside. No, and even when we did those hillside ridgeline views, and we talked about being able to see it from Pacific Avenue up that draw, and that was one of those, very little bit, and it was one of those things that we had to get an invariance for. Like even down there, when people look at it, it doesn't look that big, and so it's always so much fun for me for today, for people to get into the lobby and be like, wow, this is a lot bigger than what I thought it was. And I'm like, yes, that's what the design was meant to do, So
good surprises.
Yeah.
Well, I know with the night sky, one of the things that I thought was a big win, as everyone on this call knows, there were a lot of decisions that had to be made, thousands and thousands of them. And there were two sides to almost every decision. And one of the decisions that I am so grateful for is that there was no lighting around the loop, around the boardwalk loop, just to be able to allow the night sky and experiencing that as you could walk around and go off onto the site. Granted, you have to be careful, but you need to be careful in the Badlands, right? And so there's just a lot of those kind of moments that could have gone one way, could have gone another way. And it's just beautiful as it is out there. I was wondering, as you all imagined this day, right? July 4th, 2026. Once it comes and it's here, and I'd say we're arbitrarily there right now, there's always something that is surprising for us. And like Amy, you stated that we knew that the building was always going to blend into the landscape, but it really blends into the landscape. Is there anything else that just being out there on a 99.9% completed project that you just didn't expect and is a pleasant surprise? And I'm hoping Stacy, maybe you have one, or Zach, as you're out there, and just these last couple weeks, I hope you guys have had a chance to go and experience it.
Well, I guess for me, like I guess it wasn't completely surprising, but the rammed earth walls on the inside just make the lobby space. I mean, it's one of those, I like the, like the layering and everything. I mean, you can definitely see it, and we watched it kind of go up, and then I thought it was just like one wall, but then no, it's like a series of walls where it's like you are kind of amongst the buttes, and so that was surprising. And then there's other details that there's so much symbology built within the building itself that I didn't really know about until you take the tours. Like the one thing that I liked with the preview is that part of the lobby's front desk was a tree that was in New York that Theodore Roosevelt had planted. And so that tree has been used a couple of times throughout the process. And, the symbology started even from day one when the zoning application to the county was submitted to the county on October 27th. So it's like, okay, we know that that's Theodore Roosevelt's birthday. So that's another layer. And I mean, there's, allusions to the brands and even like the rammed earth wall, I think is 26 feet high. because he's the
It's around
26th president. That's what was said too. And so some things are, yeah, it's fun to learn, and it's like, okay, yep, they are definitely building in whatever symbology, and which is cool, and it personalizes everything about the building.
Some of the one thing that I noticed when I came to the preview opening last Friday, I got there as staff were getting to the building and as contractors and workers kind of finalizing details were getting to the building. So it was around 8 a.m. And I never imagined the experience of being like kind of back in the back parking lot and like seeing this little swarm of people getting out of their vehicles, there was a couple people showing up on bikes, and then like walking and making their way to the building, like from all these different directions, and then like meeting at some of the pathways and then walking to the building together. That was like a sequence that, yeah, I knew people were going to park in the parking lot and walk to the building, but to see like dozens of people doing it all at once, like to get to work at 8, was like a really interesting experience that I wouldn't have imagined. And
I wish you would have videoed that.
Yeah, I have a photo of it. It doesn't quite capture the moment, but the fact that people were walking and outside, like outside in this amazing landscape, going to this amazing building, was a really unique thing. I think that not a lot of people going to work in an office experience that kind of a thing.
Those are great comments. I just have a couple questions left, and these are kind of more around Medora today, because I think everybody was just really curious about what today would be like for Medora, for somebody that lives in Medora or visits or has a business in Medora. And so I'd love to hear your thoughts on the challenges that you're seeing in Medora, and then some of the opportunities. And Amy, I'll let you pick what you want from that list.
Well, I think just North Dakota in general, the challenge is workforce, and this being such a small town and not a lot of places to build around here, is that workforce housing, I think, remains as one of our biggest challenges in our community. And so as visitation grows and new opportunities emerge, we need to be able to attract more employees, not just ourselves, but all of our other businesses in town need to be able to attract employees, and for those employees to have a place to live as well. So I think that's one of the biggest challenges. I have to say the opportunities, Jen. I mean, the water infrastructure, the sidewalks, all of the pedestrian safety. I tell you what, everyone is using the new crosswalks. They're purposely using them. I'm watching it happen. People are crossing in places that you in where the crosswalks were actually put in, and they're like new locations. And I've even used some of those too. And so all of the infrastructure that's been added to the community for pedestrians, even the extra green space, has been so fun for me, because it's easy to be a pedestrian in Medora, but we've made it, the library coming has made it even easier. There's more sidewalks and pedestrian safety. And so I've really enjoyed seeing that happen.
Perfect. What are you seeing, Stacy?
Well, I would say we're probably in the biggest growth spurt that Medora has seen for quite some time. I mean, I'm not really sure, what the 60s were like in Medora. That was like the first kickoff. I wasn't born then, but that was like the first capital kickoff where there's a lot of new construction in the community. And now we're at another spike where it's going to bring a new normal. And what that new normal is it's like, I think it's still exciting, but people are kind of cautious at the same time. But I think, Medora is a challenging community because we're landlocked by federal lands, and so there's we can still have that small town feel, but then grow appropriately and find places for people to live and be more of a year-round community versus a seasonal community. That would be an aspiration. It's still unknown.
Well, as an architect that grew up really close to the site, I remember the rest stops along I-94 were my inspiration to become an architect. I thought that they were cool and unique, and that's what I wanted to do, was design rest stops. And already, it's July 4th, and I know that so many young people in North Dakota are aware of this project, and they're aware of just something different and inspiring and face melting that is available to them. Like, they don't have to fly to Paris to see this. Mm-hmm. It's here. And it's also infused with just these principles that are what our kids need, what we need to be good citizens, to be good people, to live our fullest life. And so I'm just so grateful that this building will inspire so many young people in the state, and also in not just North Dakota, Montana and South Dakota. They're also so close that I could see schools visiting and becoming a part of this story too. So the impact is hard to measure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But I do want to say that, as Zach and I collaborated in our company to execute this work, it would have never been possible without working with you, Stacy, how organized you were, how thoughtful you were. We were able to collaborate through any question and concern and put everything in front of the leaders that we needed to through very clear processes. And Amy, the amount of knowledge you have about that place that we could infuse into the design and into the processes and communicate to the people. And so I just see you both as just great leaders for years and years that have made it an enjoyable experience for us, but also so successful. So I just want to thank you for your time today. We're super grateful to know you and to have gotten to work with you, and for your time today. So thank you so much. Thank you for listening to Bold by Nature. These conversations are a reminder of just how extraordinary this project is, and we are so glad you're along for the journey. Join us next time, where we'll go behind the scenes of one of the most ambitious features of the Theodore Roosevelt Presidential Library, the living, walkable earth roof.